letters prove Marcus is draining the accounts? Or do they prove your desperation, you liar?
Enough! Stop this madness right now. Let me see those files.
The evidence is right here, Chief. Explain these violations.
We caught him red-handed, Chief. Liar! The gardener is a thief. You framed me because I have the offshore bank logs. Bank logs? You can't even read.
Under the scorching, unforgiving heat of the midday sun, the sprawling, manicured lawns of the grand Zakura estate echoed with the sharp, mocking laughter of corporate parasites. Standing beneath the imported French oak trees, senior estate manager Marcus carelessly tossed a handful of clipped weeds right onto Elion's bent back, sneering with absolute contempt. Look at him, gentlemen, a silent, uneducated gardener from the backwoods of Lagos who doesn't even know the difference between a shovel and a legal document. He thinks he's part of the family, but to us, he's just dirt that needs sweeping every morning. The visiting board members joined in the cruel laughter, completely blind to the reality unfolding right before their eyes. To everyone in the high-end mansion, Elon was just an invisible worker, a quiet, dusty shadow who spent his days pruning hedges and carrying heavy bags of fertilizer. They underestimated his mind, his silence, and his quiet dignity, treating him like a piece of estate furniture while they brazenly discussed their multi-million-dollar fraud schemes right out in the open air, assuming the gardener couldn't even read English, let alone comprehend corporate law. But the moment the arrogant managers retreated back into the air-conditioned executive office, Elion's posture completely shifted. He lowered his broom, pulled a thin, leather-bound notebook from his canvas tool belt, and began writing with lightning-fast, flawless precision. Beneath his rough gardener's exterior lay a mind sharpened by a top-tier international audit degree. A brilliant financial analyst who didn't just understand land maps and invoices, he could spot a forged corporate signature from a mile away. To uncover the foundation of the multi-million-dollar fraud, Elon needed to access the estate's secondary offline archive terminal hidden inside the old maintenance shed. He walked quietly to the heavy, rusted steel fuse box on the back wall, gripping a solid brass master key. Clink, slide, chunk. The crisp, unmistakable mechanical sound of a heavy brass lock turning inside a vintage steel housing. He swung open the heavy steel door, exposing a tangled nest of vintage analog relay switches and copper backup wires. Pulling a small professional digital diagnostic reader from his pocket, he attached a pair of copper alligator clips directly onto the live terminal blocks. Squeak, zzz, scritch, the tight, rhythmic friction of metallic teeth biting down firmly onto the copper wire, instantly bypassing the estate's corporate firewall. Finally, he reached for a heavy Bakelite safety switch and slammed it upward into the active circuit slot. Thud. Clack chunk. The massive manual switch locked home with absolute authority. A low, satisfying electrical hum vibrated through the metal chassis as the small handheld screen downloaded hundreds of hidden land transfer deeds, revealing the exact corporate shell companies currently stealing the estate out from under Chief Zakora. That night, as the rest of the grand mansion fell fast asleep, the peaceful silence of the Zakora estate was shattered by the low, heavy rumble of uninvited heavy machinery. Peering through his second-floor shed window, Elon watched in the pale moonlight as two massive, unmarked commercial transport trucks rolled silently across the pristine back lawns, their headlights switched completely off. Men in dark tactical gear swarmed the southern perimeter, bringing heavy mechanical excavators directly onto the ancestral family grounds. Without a shred of respect for the land or the family history, the metal claws tore mercilessly into the rich soil, uprooting centuries-old mahogany trees that had stood as living pillars of the Zakura legacy. They weren't just landscaping, they were digging deep to unearth and destroy something buried beneath the foundation. Moving like a ghost through the shadows of the estate, Elon crept closer to the main digging site, his camera ready to document the crime. But as he reached the historic archive vault near the garden greenhouse, he found the heavy mahogany doors wide open. Inside, filing cabinets had been violently ripped apart, and all the original land grants, ancestral title deeds, and historical tax maps from the founding days of the estate had completely vanished into thin air. The corrupt managers were systematically wiping away every legal trace of the Zakora family's ownership, replacing true deeds with digital forgeries routed through offshore accounts in Zurich and Dubai. The stakes had exploded overnight. It wasn't just a simple land fraud anymore. As Elon quickly scanned a discarded shipping manifest left behind by the trucks, he saw horrifying proof of illegal weapons transit and financial money laundering operating right beneath the family's feet. First thing the next morning, Elon rushed straight to the executive terrace, where Chief Zakora sat reviewing morning reports, holding the stolen manifest and photos of the midnight excavation. "Chief, you have to look at these files right now. Marcus and the board are systematically forging your land titles and running illegal cargo through the estate grounds." But before Chief Zakora could even answer, Marcus stepped out from behind a marble pillar with a cold, condescending sneer. Marcus burst into arrogant laughter, looking at the chief with feigned disbelief. "Chief, are you really going to listen to this delusional ground sweeper? He spends all day playing in the dirt, and now he thinks he's a corporate auditor. He's just a confused gardener trying to cause trouble because we caught him stealing tools from the shed." Chief Zakora sighed, rubbing his temples in exhaustion, looking at Elon with disappointment. "Elon, I appreciate your hard work on the lawns, but stick to gardening. Leave the estate business to the professionals." The next morning, the grand Zakura estate buzzed with an ominous energy. As the sun crested the horizon, Elon arrived at the main tool shed, unaware that Marcus's enforcers had already broken in. Elon reached for his locker, but before he could open it, two stern-faced estate security guards stepped forward, blocking his path. "Elon Adebayo," the head guard announced coldly. "We have received reports of massive financial embezzlement and theft of company property. You are to come with us to the main office immediately for questioning." He was frog-marched into the plush executive boardroom where Marcus sat at the head of the mahogany table, radiating false concern. "Elon, I warned you about staying in your lane," Marcus sighed dramatically, placing a thick manila folder onto the table. "But we found these hidden banking transfer codes linking your personal account to the offshore shell companies siphoning Chief Zakora's funds. We also found a master key for the main archive vault in your locker. How could you betray the man who gave you a job?"
Elon glanced at the documents and saw they were crude forgeries, amateurish printouts he could disprove in seconds. "Chief Zakora, these are plants. I don't have access to these accounts, and I certainly didn't break into the vault. This is a framing attempt by—" But Marcus cut him off with a sharp, dismissive laugh. "Enough lies! We are calling the authorities. Take him away and hold him in the estate holding room until the police arrive. Chief, I strongly suggest we freeze all of Elon's assets immediately before he transfers more funds." Thrown into the estate's damp, cold, concrete holding room beneath the main greenhouse, Elon knew his time was running out. He had only hours before the police arrived. Marcus wiped the servers clean, and the estate was lost forever. He needed to access the estate's decentralized backup network, which was physically routed through an old, unused irrigation junction box in the room's back wall. Elon knelt down, pulling a small, modified multi-tool from the sole of his work boot.
He successfully pulled the panel off, revealing the estate's deep-level, offline network port, a tangle of thick, shielded fiber optic cables and older Cat6 lines. He pulled a specialized, credit card-sized optical data extractor from his belt and physically spliced it directly into the main communication line. Click, snap, hiss. The incredibly crisp, high-fidelity sound of a proprietary connector snapping perfectly into place, instantly establishing a secure, untraceable uplink. Finally, he grabbed the manual security override lever on the floor unit and jammed it downward into the lockdown bypass slot. Thud, clack, chunk. The heavy metal lever locked into place with absolute finality. The entire estate's digital surveillance system simultaneously rebooted and flashed across his small screen, granting him unauthorized access to Marcus's private communications, offshore bank accounts, and digital meeting logs with the international syndicate. Working with surgical precision, Elon downloaded years of incriminating financial transactions, falsified invoices, and digital signatures signed by Marcus himself. But as he accessed the deeper encrypted archives of the offshore accounts in Zurich, he froze in absolute horror. The massive land fraud and money laundering schemes were just a diversion. The final file he decrypted revealed Marcus's involvement in the accidental death of Chief Zakora's late wife, a murder disguised as a tragic car accident 8 years ago. The conspiracy was far deeper, far darker, and far more personal than anyone on the estate suspected. Marcus hadn't just been stealing money. He had been slowly dismantling the Zakura family legacy for nearly a decade, orchestrating a silent, hostile takeover that began with the patriarch's profound grief and ended with a complete corporate shutdown. As the clock ticked down toward noon and the arrival of the police, Elon realized he wasn't just an innocent gardener anymore. He was the family's final shield against the syndicate. Elon knew he couldn't wait for the police to arrive. The game was already rigged. He disconnected the optical extractor, slipped it back into his vest, and waited by the heavy steel door. At 11:58 a.m., 2 new security guards arrived to transfer him. As they unlocked the heavy bolts, Elon, using his gardener's physical strength, jammed his shovel into the doorframe, instantly blocking the mechanism and sending the heavy steel door flying backward, knocking the astonished guards off balance. With every second counting, Elon sprinted toward the estate's central communication array, needing to physically upload the evidence onto Marcus's main workstation before the servers locked him out entirely. As he burst out of the service entrance, he saw Marcus's personal security team, visored liquidation operators armed with suppressed submachine guns, systematically sweeping the grounds with flashlights. The Shadow Cartel wasn't just calling the police, they were executing an immediate, hostile scrub protocol to erase Elon permanently. Utilizing his deep knowledge of the estate, Elon easily bypassed Marcus's blinded guards, rushing toward the main manor through an old subterranean drainage canal. But as he burst out into the grand marble lobby of the Zakura mansion, he found himself trapped. Standing confidently in the center of the hall, flanked by 3 armed mercenaries, was Director Amanda Vance, who had somehow broken free from her London captivity, aiming her weapon directly at Elion's chest. Did you really think Switzerland belonged to you, Doctor of the Bio? Vance hissed with a cold smile.
Before Elon could move, the grand front doors burst open with a deafening roar. A massive, armored Mercedes-Benz S600 pulled dramatically into the lobby, the tires screeching against the polished marble. The driver's door swung open and Chief Zakora emerged, his eyes blazing with a regal fury. "You will not touch a hair on this young man's head in my own home, Director Vance," the patriarch roared, gripping his gold walking cane and forcefully stepping between his gardener and the mercenaries, while the boardroom investors watched in absolute silence. The flashing red and blue lights of the special federal task force cruisers cut through the grand windows of the Zakura estate, casting harsh, sweeping shadows across the marble lobby. Two senior federal investigators marched through the front doors, flanked by armed officers. Marcus stepped forward with a venomous smile, handing over a thick, legal-bound folder to the lead investigator. "Inspector, look no further. This rogue gardener and his unauthorized digital equipment are the epicenter of the multi-million-dollar fraud and document tampering that has bled this estate dry." Chief Zakora stepped forward, his majestic frame trembling with suppressed rage as he pointed his gold walking cane directly at Marcus. "Inspector, do not touch that boy. The only criminals standing in this room are the corporate vultures wearing tailored suits who have spent a decade undermining my family's legacy." Director Vance smirked coldly from the sidelines, crossing her arms. "Your personal loyalty is blanding you, Chief. The physical audit records and digital transfer keys found in Elion's locker don't lie. Case closed." 2 hours later, the high-stakes confrontation moved from the estate to the high-security federal courtrooms of Lagos. The mahogany gallery was packed with anxious board members, international financial reporters, and corporate attorneys. Presiding Judge Aliyu adjusted his glasses, looking down sternly from the elevated bench. "We are here to review the emergency asset seizure and embezzlement charges against Elon Adebayo and the Zakura estate. Defense, present your conclusive evidence of guilt." Marcus's lead attorney stepped forward with an arrogant grin, placing a heavy, physical hardware drive on the prosecution podium. "Your Honor, we submit the Master System Diagnostic Drive recovered from the estate's main server. It contains the exact moment of data manipulation." But before the judge could accept it, Elon raised his hand with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, before they review their forged drive, I request permission to connect my portable offline field terminal to the court's master projector." Elon slid a heavy, vintage, copper-plated thumb drive into the system's isolated analog bridge interface. Click, clack, whir. The crisp, high-fidelity mechanical sound of internal data relays locking into alignment as the massive courtroom projection screens flickered to life. "They brought a manipulated disk, Your Honor," Elon stated, his voice echoing cleanly through the courtroom acoustics. "Allow me to show you the true paper trail of the London and Zurich shadow cartel."
Finally, he pressed the physical master execution switch on his mobile console. Thud. Clack chunk. The heavy switch locked home with absolute finality. The massive overhead screens instantly exploded with vibrant, unassailable data streams, displaying high-resolution photos, intercepted email logs, time-stamped CCTV footage of the midnight excavation, and original land titles bearing Marcus's true, unredacted signature. The courtroom erupted into frantic whispers. On the massive screens, every single forged document presented by Marcus was systematically dismantled, line by line. Elon pulled up the exact digital fingerprints showing Marcus uploading the fake embezzlement files into the staff lockers late at night. "These aren't my files, Your Honor," Elon declared, turning to look directly at a sweating, pale-faced Marcus. "These are the private offshore transaction logs of the corporate syndicate attempting to steal the Zakura legacy." Director Vance tried to stand up and object, but Judge Aliyu slammed his wooden gavel down with an earth-shattering crack that echoed through the hall. "Sit down, Director Vance, or you will join them in holding for contempt. The court has reviewed the cryptographic hashes of these documents, and they are mathematically authentic." Marcus collapsed back into his chair, his hands shaking uncontrollably as the web of lies he spent a decade weaving disintegrated in a matter of minutes. With a sharp click of steel cuffs, federal marshals instantly swarmed the prosecution table, grabbing Marcus and snapping heavy handcuffs onto his wrists. "Marcus, you are under arrest for international corporate fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy against sovereign African assets." Director Vance attempted to slip quietly toward the exit doors, but two tactical officers blocked her path, locking silver cuffs around her wrists as well. The Shadow Cartel's leadership had finally been brought down in open court. As Marcus and Director Vance were hauled out of the courtroom in disgrace, the digital screens flashed a final confirmation message. All Zakura estate assets restored, sovereign ownership verified. The entire gallery rose to their feet in thunderous applause, honoring the brilliant young man who had risked everything to save the family legacy. Chief Zakora walked over to a lion, his eyes shining with profound tears of pride and gratitude, pulling him into a powerful, emotional embrace. Later that evening, as the golden rays of the African sunset cascaded over the perfectly manicured lawns of the Zakura estate, the atmosphere was thick with a quiet, emotional reverence. The corporate storm had passed, the Shadow Cartel was shattered, and the estate was finally safe. Elon stood alone near the old rose garden, gently trimming the overgrown hedges with his classic steel shears, perfectly content to slip back into his quiet, invisible role now that justice had been fully served. Footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path behind him. A lion turned around to see Chief Zakora walking slowly across the grass, holding a weathered, leather-bound envelope in his aged hands. The patriarch's eyes were filled with an overwhelming depth of emotion as he looked at the young man who had single-handedly protected his entire legacy. Chief Zakora stopped just a few feet away, his voice trembling slightly with profound gratitude and awe. Chief Zakora stepped forward, placing his heavy, warm hand firmly on Elion's shoulder, looking straight into his eyes. For months, everyone on this estate saw a simple, uneducated gardener playing in the dirt. But the man who protected my entire life, who saved my family's history, and who preserved everything I've ever built, was standing in my garden all along, watching over me like a guardian angel. Elon lowered his gaze modestly, keeping his expression humble as the weight of the moment settled over the estate. Chief Zakora slowly opened the weathered leather envelope and pulled out a single yellowed hospital document, a physical paper record from 8 years ago, complete with an old-school embossed stamp and heavy metal staple. Clack, rustle, slide. The crisp, unmistakable acoustic sound of aged parchment sliding out of a tight leather sleeve, bringing forward the long buried secret that changed everything. Chief Zakora looked down at the fading ink of the receipt, his breath catching in his throat as the memories came flooding back. When I handed this envelope to you earlier today, I realized something incredible, the chief whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. You didn't just stumble into this estate by accident, did you, Elon? Tell me the truth. Why did you really come here? Elon paused, looking down at his gardening shears before finally meeting the old man's gaze. Elon took a slow, deep breath, the evening breeze rustling through the nearby mahogany trees. Sir, do you remember 8 years ago in Lagos, a young man standing outside a crowded city hospital, holding his wife who was fighting for her life after a horrific accident, with zero money to pay for her emergency surgery? You walked past, asked no questions, demanded no identity, and paid the entire medical bill out of your own pocket before driving away without ever looking back. Chief Zakora's eyes widened in stunned disbelief. He stared at Alien, trying to bridge the gap across 8 long years. You were that young man? Alien nodded softly. You never remembered me, Chief. You helped thousands of people, and my face was just a blur in the hospital corridor. But I never forgot. When I heard whispers that your estate was being targeted by corporate predators and shadow cartels, I didn't come here for money or status or revenge. I left my career, hid my credentials, and took a job as your gardener solely to protect the man who once saved my wife's life when the whole world turned its back on us. Chief Zakora broke down completely, pulling Elon into a deep emotional embrace as tears of pure gratitude fell onto the garden grass. The old billionaire choked out through his sobs. I thought I gave a stranger one day of casual kindness. I never in all my years imagined that kindness would come back years later to save my entire life and legacy from utter destruction. The emotional weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, proving that no act of genuine humanity is ever truly wasted in this world. Elon smiled gently, stepping back from the embrace, picking up his gardening shears with a quiet, grounded dignity. He looked at the blooming estate around them and spoke the words that would echo through the history of the Zakura legacy for generations to come. A good deed is never buried, sir. It only waits for the right season to bloom. Chief Zakora wiped his eyes, breaking into a warm, proud smile as he stood shoulder to shoulder with the man who was no longer just his gardener, but the true son of his heart and the eternal protector of the African soil. What an absolute, unforgettable masterwork of a journey. From the quiet whispers of Lagos Garden to the highest stakes boardrooms of global corporate power, Elaine and Chief Zakora have proven that loyalty, honor, and true kindness will always conquer the darkest greed of man. If this epic story touched your heart, left you breathless, and proved the power of an unforgettable plot twist, show your massive support right now. Type "Never Bury Kindness" in the comments section below. Hit that subscribe button, turn on every single notification for Abby Stories Empire immediately, and share this masterpiece with everyone you know, because true storytelling lives forever right here.